Hi, friends. I'm back. My back is not back. Well, not all the way. So, this week, I want to do something quick and easy. Something that I can do in smaller chunks of time. And I have the itch to paint. So, let's paint. These are those little wooden circles you can find just about anywhere, and they come in a bunch of different sizes. I like to keep a stack of these on my craft cart. And anytime I have extra paint left over that isn't quite enough to save, I just throw it on these circles. I figured eventually I would find a way to use them, and I guess I did. So I'm going to make a bunch of mini paintings. I definitely won't get through all of these this week, but I'm just going to do as many as I can. First, I'm going to choose one of these cool gradient-y ones. And on it, I want to paint a moth. I can't remember why, but I have this picture on my phone. So now I must paint a cool pastel-y moth. For all of these paintings, I'm going to be using these brush tip paint markers because I don't want to mix up a bunch of paint and I don't want to keep having to get up and search for supplies. You might be wondering what I did to my back to injure it. I have no idea. Apparently, just existing for this long is too much for it. A couple of weeks ago, I was just cleaning like a good little rose, bent over, and my back went on strike. No bending, no turning. Even standing up was on the list of things that were not fun. I'm definitely on the mend now, but it was a long couple of weeks of being completely useless and frustrated. I went into most of these paintings with just a vague plan or an inspiration photo, but I didn't bother sketching anything out. And on some of them, it shows. This moth was looking a little top-heavy, so I added some little droopy boob things to his bottom wings. And then he looked a little too butterfly-y. So I added a fat blue body and made it uber fuzzy. Moths have a very fuzzy vibe about them. I did have swatches of all of these markers next to me, but that didn't seem to stop me from picking colors that barely show up on top of other colors. But, oh well, I was having fun. And now for my favorite part, his fuzzy antenna. Antennae? Who cares? Oh my god. They are amazing. You know how they make those cute headbands with like cat ears or little bug antenna? I want a headband with these fuzzy antenna on them. I felt like the moth needed to stand out a little bit more, so I went around it with a white paint marker. And then I went back and touched up some of the fuzz that got lost and evened out the wings in spots where the white made it very obvious that it wasn't even. Last, the background needed just a little something, so I added some cute stars. Moths also have a very night vibe about them. And this one is done. Oh, he's really cute. I love him. These body fuzzies are just the best. Next, I'm going to use one of these yellow ones, and because the moth sort of reminded me of folk art, I'm going to paint something else that's in a lot of folk art. Flowers. Not that either of these little paintings are even remotely folk arty, but that's just where the train in my brain started, and it just went down a long track. I'm honestly feeling a little nutty lately. Since I couldn't get into my craft room, I passed the time by watching a lot of art videos on YouTube. So there's like a backlog of creative energy that I wasn't able to get out. I've been catching up on so many videos from other artists that I adore, and I've watched the whole Artists in Wonderland series. Is anyone else watching that? Murals and that like spray paint style aren't usually my thing, but the series is so entertaining. And I absolutely adore Black Bean. I also, like I said in my community post, watched all of Bridgerton. I got away with not caring about it for a few years until I saw some spicy reels of Colin and Penelope so I got sucked in. Back to this painting though. The purple flower in the middle really gave me some trouble. I just kept going back over it and changing it. It just looked weird to me, but I couldn't tell what was off about it. I think this whole painting felt like that. I constantly felt like something was missing, so I just kept adding random details to it, filling in shapes with smaller shapes, adding in contrasting colors, and going back to areas that I had already worked on. I tried to spice up the background a little bit. Pretty. Oh, no. That was not good. I went back to the flowers again, and then back to the background. Okay, well, you can't even see those. That's better-ish. This tappy finger I'm doing means I'm trying to decide what to do. And I decided to add more shapes inside of shapes. I think it's about time to be done with this one. It's not my favorite, but I don't hate it. I mean, one of them has to be the worst, and if this is it, then I'll be happy. For this next one, I'm going to paint a landscape. I've done landscapes like this a fair bit before, and I think it's because they're very organized feeling. Like you have the sky, and then the mountains in the background, and then the hills or grass or whatever in the foreground. They're all very separate, and in my mind, it feels very orderly. It's a pretty weird way to describe art, but I think that's why I'm drawn to paint them over and over. The colors that I chose are obviously not the most realistic, but I mean, there was a blood red underpainting, so what do you expect? I decided to add a little river into this one, running through the foreground. And I'm just sort of throwing colors on there, going back over things until I think they look okay. Grassy area got a little messy looking, so I added a few trees in there and some rocks on the side of the river. I ran into problems when I went to work on the sky. I really wanted it to be a sort of wispy, cloudy, sunset type of sky. This paint marker is not giving me what I want. I think the problem is that the marker is too opaque, so it's really covering up the background. And I tried using my finger to sort of blend it out, but that's just not working. I tried using a red marker to blend it, and nope. Then I even used a little water on a paintbrush to try and water it down a little bit. Nothing was working, so I decided to set it aside for a bit and think about how I wanted to fix it. So while that was percolating, I decided to try something similar, but instead of land, I want to try an oceanscape. I used a few different pinks and purples, throwing them down in big streaks across the upper half and using my finger to blend them. For some reason, this was working amazingly. My guess is that there was a lot more paint, like recent paint that wasn't fully dry, and that's why it was so much easier to blend. Because even these pink clouds I'm throwing on here aren't requiring too much work. They're just putting themselves down. Ooh, this sky is so pretty. For the water, I'm doing the same thing except with darker colors, making big streaks of paint and blending them together, trying not to brush against the top and ruin my crisp horizon line. I tried to make this cool reflection thing that I saw in my reference photo, but it's not translating. I think I gave it a fair shot, but it just kept getting worse. So eventually I decided to scrap that whole part and paint it over it. It's like it never even happened. I think that's one of the reasons that I love painting as a medium. No matter how much I screw something up, and I screw a lot of things up, I can just paint over it. It makes me feel a little more free to mess stuff up. I just went with little wavy reflections on the water and then some dark land and a palm tree. This painting is really making me miss the beach. Fortunately, we don't have a lot of ocean views in Nebraska. Oh, I love this one. Excuse me while I Google beachside rentals. Okay, now back to this landscape. I think if I lay down a bunch of paint first, I should have more success in blending. I'm sticking with a red sky, because why not? And then I used a light orange for the clouds and blended out the edges with my finger. The colors on this painting are so unhinged, but I actually really like it. I did do a few touch-ups on the mountains, and then this one is done. I think I like this one. It sort of looks like a nuclear bomb just went off on the other side of the mountains, but like in an aesthetic way. Yeah, okay, no. Moving on. Next, I'm gonna work on this blue one. And after that oceanscape, I really wanted to paint more water. So I thought I'd go back to this water technique that I tried out before. I'll put a link in the description box to the artist that I learned this technique from. I am really loving these brush tip markers. Like, I am just flying through these paintings. Has anyone else noticed lately that a ton of companies are coming out with paint markers now? Ohuhu just came out with paint markers recently, and I just saw a video of someone using paint markers made by Sharpie. Like, what? The last thing that I need is more paint markers, but I still want them all. I added a few lily pads on here, and I was gonna add a koi fish, but I didn't. Don't actually remember why. So I probably shouldn't have even mentioned it. Anyway, the lilies were looking a little blobby, so I used a white gel pen to give them outlines. It makes them look so cool. I added a few thicker shadows, and this one is done. I really like this one. It might look cooler with a nice orange koi fish right there in the middle, but what are you gonna do? Now, I have a bunch of these silver ones, and only one really obvious idea. I want to paint a disco ball. I keep seeing all these cool Mirrorball paintings, and I really want to try one. Except I have no idea how to draw a Mirrorball, so I looked it up. And I feel like the instructions I followed were a little lacking. Like, I feel like the lines and angles need to be pretty precise, but that wasn't on there, so I'm just gonna go with what it said. I also have no idea what actual colors and reflections and all of that would be realistically, but a lot of the paintings I see are super colorful and just use every color. So I started with lighter tones of yellow, working my way through orange, pink, and into purple, getting darker as I went. I really just sort of placed the colors randomly. Other than not putting two squares of the same color next to each other, I didn't follow any order. I just put them where it sort of looked good to my eyes. Does this actually look like a mirror ball? I honestly can't tell anymore. I've stared at it for too long. After coloring all of the squares in, the lines were kind of drunk looking, so I used a silver marker to go over all of them. Which looks a lot better, but there's still a few areas that are a little tipsy, so I added some white sparkles to cover those up. I like this one, and I will probably do it again. I mean, I do have a bunch of silver circles to practice on. Now, for this next one, I want to try something a little harder. I want to paint a Bigfoot. I've been wanting to paint a Bigfoot for a while now. I don't know why. I just have. But I don't want to do a scary Bigfoot. I want to do a cute one. So he's going to be surrounded by a cute, cartoony forest. I sketched this out because he's going to have forest behind and in front of him, and I wanted to work in layers, doing the farthest background first. Does anyone else paint like that, or is that just how my weird brain demands it? I think it's easier to do the background first and then just cover it with the closer items than to try and paint a background around the main object and do a lot of touch-ups. Does anyone actually care? Anyway, I didn't really plan out what Bigfoot was going to look like at all. Like, I have a couple of cute references that I'm looking at, but he doesn't really end up looking like either of them. I'm kind of just shaping him out as I go. He's supposed to look like he's in that stereotypical mid-walk Sasquatch stance, but I feel like it's sort of getting lost in the fur with his arm over here on the left. I probably should have done a more blocky color sort of style for him, but it's not bad for a first attempt. He does kind of look like the kid from Jumanji though. To distract from that, I'm just going to add a buttload of colors and details to the forest around him. Alright, so it's not too bad. I really like the colors of the forest, but I definitely want to try Bigfoot again in a different style. Okay, I think I have time for one more. For this one, I want to paint a skunk, but like a more realistic, painterly one. I think it's partly inspired by this funny raccoon painting, and partly this cute pig. I really want to make him cute and fuzzy. So I chose a bunch of grays so that he could have a little more depth and not just be straight black. I started with a base coat of this very dark gray, and then I went over it with black in just a few areas. I didn't want to use too much black since you need to be able to tell where his curves are and where his nose and eyes were. I just went back and forth layering different shades, trying to make highlights and shadows while still looking blended and not like chunks of color. Kinda looks like an otter right now. Adding the white stripe to his face did help, but I definitely think he needed a darker gray that I didn't have to really capture his skunky essence. Right now, he kinda looks like a dusty skunk. Like a skunk that just walked through the back of your garage. I just remembered that I knew someone that had a skunk as a pet. I wonder whatever happened to that person. I tried a few different highlights that looked awful, and we'll just get rid of those. And then I realized he needs a body, so he's not just a floating head. I used the same dusty fur technique for his body, but I left a little blue gap in there so that you can tell where his face ends and his body begins. And this last one is done. Overall, I like him. He looks like a grandpa skunk who's just going a little gray. So here they are all done. This is how I would rank them from my most favorite to my least favorite. Overall, I had a really good time. Most of these were really quick, and even though I can see things that I would do differently or change, that's the same thing, dummy. Anyway, it felt good to be back in my craft room and getting some creative energy out again. What do you think? Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.